Hello, and welcome back to the ACIM Book Club. It's day 1 of chapter 3 now in the complete and annotated edition of A Course in Miracles. And we're discussing section 1 called The Need to Study. I'm Alison Anton with the ForgiveNest Podcast for A Course in Miracles. This first section of chapter 3 was a real turning point for me because it was actually this section that led me to do the video commentaries and to start the ACIM Book Club. So late last summer in 2025, I started the text again, thinking I was just going to read it all the way through. But every time I got to today's section, I felt the urgent need to stop and go back. And the pushback was really strong, and it happened not once, but 3 times. I went back 3 times when I hit this section. I felt like I really needed to listen to what Jesus says in paragraph 4. He says, "The next part of this course rests too heavily on the earlier part, not to require its study." What I didn't know then was that I was being guided to do the ACIM Book Club. And here I am, feeling like I've finally been given the green light to move ahead with commentaries for chapter 3 of the CE now. As the title of this section suggests, Jesus gives us instruction to really study the material in chapters 1 and 2 before moving on. There's a reason for that. And today's practice statement tells us why. So let's start there. Please close your eyes and go within. And take a deeper, calming breath. And say to yourself, I am training my mind to prepare myself for God. Okay, and you can open your eyes, and we'll read our first summary for chapter 3. To be a good student, I need to study this course, to see my problems as being answered there, and to assign myself study and review periods. As I read, I must not use the defense of pseudo-retardation, we'll get to that, where I act like I don't understand what, in fact, I do. Study will give me the solid foundation I need so that when I encounter God, I will experience Him with the appropriate wondrous awe, rather than misinterpreting that awe as fear. Jesus starts us out with some schooling that this isn't just a book for us as the readers or for Helen as the scribe. A lot of these notes were instructions for her, but obviously they can be applied just as readily to us because, like Helen, we're learning Jesus's course. All learning involves attention and study at some level. This course is a mind training course. Good students assign study periods for themselves. He says at the end, you vaguely know that the course is intended for some sort of preparation. But are you prepared? We find later near the end of this section that the preparation he's alluding to is to get us ready for God's presence. And we'll talk about that when we get there. But let's be clear here that Jesus wants us to devote attention and study to his course. He wants us to search through the previous material that we've read for the solutions to the problems we're facing in our lives. He even wants us to assign study periods and review periods for ourselves. These next couple paragraphs might be a little challenging on the PC level in regard to Jesus using the term mental retardation. But let's remember that this was scribed in 1965, and that was the clinical term for someone with mental disabilities back then. But let's take a sec and take the charge off of that word, and let's simply look at the verb to retard. As a verb, it means to delay or hold back in terms of progress or development or accomplishment. So what Jesus is doing in these paragraphs is comparing someone with true clinical mental retardation with someone who has what Jesus calls pseudo retardation. For the person with true retardation, he says some interesting things. He says, when it occurs in the literal sense, it is a temporary device agreed on beforehand to check the miscreative abilities of a strong but misdirected will. The person himself is a poor learner by definition, but only as a step toward changing from a bad to a good one. Just from these short passages, we gather that a soul who comes into a physical body here with a mental disability has agreed to this beforehand on the mind level, according to A Course in Miracles. It's not something that's been imposed upon him or her. This is because, as Jesus implies here, that this person has a strong will, but it's misdirected, or it has been misdirected, maybe potentially in past lives. Jesus would say this is a positive use of a defense, one that is used on behalf of the truth. But most importantly, and this is all a lead up for Jesus to discuss the wrong use of this defense, which he calls pseudo-retardation syndrome. He says, mental retardation can also be used, however, as a maladaptive defense if the wrong or attack side is employed. This produces the pseudo-retardation syndrome. What he means by pseudo-retardation is that a person who does not clinically have a mental disability puts on a guise of retardation in order to achieve a certain end, or in this case, not achieve a certain end. It's a block that we put in our minds that subtly, or maybe not subtly, says, I don't understand this, or I don't understand you. So Jesus says, you may well be using this defense as you read this course. This represents a joint attack on both yourself and me, because it renders your mind weak and mine incompetent. I think we can all attest to this behavior as we read the course. It's challenging, yes, but what if we actually do understand what Jesus is saying, but we simply don't want to understand it? We pretend to want it, but let's be honest. The moment we understand the material perfectly is the moment we step out of the game of illusion. And we simply don't want that, or the ego doesn't want that, if we're again totally honest with ourselves. So this is the pseudo-retardation syndrome. On a subconscious or even conscious level, we pretend we don't understand. The consequences of this, as he mentions next, is remember, this puts you in a truly fearful position. If you cannot understand either your own mind or mine, you do not know what is really willed. Remember back to chapter 2, where he teaches us about the behavior-will conflict. If we don't understand how our own mind is trying to operate the system here, we can't see what we truly will. Our behavior is going to be off kilter from our true will. Let's put this into context for this section. Because the material of the course frightens us, and more to the point, because what the course is preparing us for frightens us, we behave erratically by pretending we don't want to understand the course. But under it all, we truly do want to understand, and we do want to learn. We wouldn't be reading it if we didn't. So although this quick section seems like we could just skim by it, he's really instructing us to pay attention. He wants us to understand the workings of the mind, which was what chapter 2 was all about, before moving ahead. There's only so far we can go in the course with pseudo-retardation blocking us from aligning our will with Jesus so we can proceed. And from here until the end is where he lays down why this is so important. The next part of this course rests too heavily on the earlier part not to require its study. Without this, you will become much too fearful when the unexpected does occur to make constructive use of it. The reason why a solid foundation is necessary at this point is because of the highly likely confusion of fearful and awesome, which most people do make. With these statements, he's drawing us back to the likely scenario that not if, but when we find ourselves in the presence of God via revelation, we'll mistake awe for fear. We don't, as of yet, know the difference between these two because our minds are confused. It's clear that Jesus wants his students to be more ready to differentiate these, and here's why. He says, the next step, however, does involve the direct approach to God himself. It would be most unwise to start on this step at all without very careful preparation, or awe will surely be confused with fear, and the experience will be more traumatic than beatific. And then he concludes with, healing is of God in the end. The means are carefully explained in this course. Revelation may occasionally show you the end, but to reach it, the means are needed. Healing leads to God, but before we get there, we need to make use of the means for healing, which is the instructions laid out in the course material. So far, at least some of those means for healing that he wants us to study up on and review are 1, the need to understand the levels of the mind. 2, how we project outward the fear-based content that's contained in our subconscious mind. 3, how we use defenses incorrectly to keep us from seeing that these are projections we make. How to correct the fear once we do recognize our projections. And also, of course, that our fear of God is totally baseless. There will come a time, if not already, when we do have revelation experiences, however fleeting. How will we respond to God's presence in these experiences? If we can't discern between awe and fear, we'll inevitably project fear onto God instead of what is really true, the awe we feel in his presence. Study of A Course in Miracles prepares us for that. Okay, so we're at the end here, but there's some things to ponder for today's section. What is your relationship with study on a spiritual path, in particularly the Course in Miracles path? To what degree would you say that you actually study the course? Based on this section, what relationship with study would you like to have? That's it for today, but let's repeat now and frequently throughout this day our reminder as to why we need to study. Please close your eyes. and repeat with conviction. I am training my mind to prepare myself for God. Amen. Okay, you can open your eyes, and we'll end this section here. Next up for tomorrow's study is section 2 of chapter 3, called Special Principles for Miracle Workers. I'm Alison Anton with the ForgiveNest Podcast for A Course in Miracles. It was great talking to you. I'll see you again tomorrow.